Hey guys, this is Sly Company here. Welcome to today's live stream. Today is March the 31st, 2024. Hope you all are doing well today. And for today's live stream, we are going to be going back to talking about another friend story. We'll see how this goes. I'm not sure if this is something that people will be interested in or not. Last time we were doing friend stories, we didn't really get a lot of views, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, for today's live stream slash friend story, I'm going to be talking about an old friend I had of mine called Chris, named Chris. And I was friends with Chris back probably around, this would have been when I was probably around fourth or fifth grade. But we were friends for several years, probably up until maybe like really good friends, probably up till like maybe beginning of middle school, so sixth grade. But by the time seventh grade rolled along, communication went kind of bad from there. Um, and there's a lot of crazy, different things that happened around that time. But I think we met originally because we were in, like, trying to think what year we moved to Charlotte. So probably around 1999 or the year 2000s when I moved to Charlotte. And then so 2004 2005 was probably when we met, I'm guessing. So anyway, uh why is this important? Because when we moved to Charlotte, um I think it was my dad eventually got a job working for Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, or I'm trying to think how. I don't recall the whole story, and I can't seem to get in touch with my dad, and he doesn't remember anything in regards to that time. So, we were in what's called a language magnet program, which what that is like a program that our school system offered at that time, which was brand new, where you could go and learn foreign language, and the system was set up like you were basically learning all your main subjects in school in that said language. For example, like typical United States or US school system would be like, oh, you go to school, you're learning your math, your English, your science, social studies, and etc. all in English, except for me, it was in French. And I was in what they called the French magnet program, which at that time it was not the strongest. I think the strongest at that time was German, because that principal, or yeah, the lady who was the, I guess, director. Well, whoever. Well, she was a principal for sure, but of that school, she was German, and I think German was like the first thing they started. And plus, there was like a contract or deal going on at the time with like, I think the Department of Education and Department of Defense or something. That was like sending money to. Essentially, the idea was like they want to get more Americans to learn foreign languages, and I think at that time they were trying to put more money into building up like their resources in Germany for the purpose of, again, trying to put a block or control against communism, and essentially like, you know, oh, we got to bid up our forces against Russia, basically. That's literally kind of the premise of it. But we didn't, at that time, of course, we didn't have no clue what we just saw it as a school where I could learn foreign language, because that was something that, in deep South, in it's not really heard of. The only other place that would probably offer that would be like maybe up north, maybe like New York, something, right? Unless you knew somebody who knew that language who could teach you. But officially teaching you French full time, not just like teaching you the language, but also teaching you math and French. Um, uh, and I think at that point, like I remember second grade, we were learning everything in French. Third grade, we were learning everything except for English. We had to leave the classroom and go to a separate class with a typical American English teacher to learn English. And that's kind of like what the system was up until like around fourth, fifth grade, when they kind of were changing everything. And I think that's probably when I first met Chris. And So Chris was also in the French program, but at that time, what they decided to do with languages is they basically now I don't know if this applied to every single language. I suspect German was better or maybe even stronger than what it was with the French program, but um, with the French program, for some reason, they decided to divide up the kids into like your average kids and then your smart kids. And Chris was part of the smart kids. Um, I was part of the average kid, but I was like top of my class of the average. Um, so they let me like I guess integrate with the smart kids if that makes any sense. And I think that's how I probably likely met Chris somehow for that program because I have no clue why they never tried to put me in like the smart program back then. Um, I'm not sure why. I have a guess as to why, but even with that guess, to me, it just seemed strange. But anyway, we were learning French, and I think, we also had like recess and playground, all that. And I remember fourth grade was kind of like when everybody was into like Yu-Gi-Oh, a little bit of Pokemon, but mainly Yu-Gi-Oh, because Yu-Gi-Oh, I think, was still kind of thing at that time. And then eventually, Yu-Gi-Oh left off, and then Pokemon was like the big thing later on for everybody. But for me, I think Chris was one of my friends because we were really into Nintendo at that time. So, at that time, the Nintendo GameCube was big. So I think what were we into? I think Super Smash Bros. Melee, or Melee is what you all know it as. Um, Even though I think back in school we all called it or melee or something like that. But melee is what I know it as nowadays. Um, but Chris had a GameCube, I had a GameCube, and a good number of people at that time, still had GameCubes. But this was right before everybody like dropped Nintendo and moved on to PlayStation and Xbox. Um, this was back when everybody still played, Nintendo's consoles. Um, but when the Wii came out and everybody dropped Nintendo, and then they pretty much sticked with Xbox and PlayStation, probably up until when the Switch came out. When the Switch came out, I think more people were willing to go back and try out Nintendo again. Um, but basically, back to Chris conversation or Chris story, right? So he and I met, I think, for the mutual like we liked Nintendo stuff. I think we were also big into Cartoon Network, a little bit of Nickelodeon, but I think we were more into Cartoon Network. Um, so we had some, we talked about cartoons. So like I think Ed and Eddie was one of the cartoons. Probably Codename Kids Next Door is probably on that list. All those kind of like early 2000s Cartoon Network cartoon shows is probably what we're talking about as well. And I think when we were in fifth grade, that was when we actually started like kids were, this was back when nobody brought video games to in my class, but I think Chris did. We had another guy, I think his name was Caleb. Um, a few other people. I think there was a guy named Aaron, maybe, or Eric. Eric, I think there was an Eric, and then you know, uh, Caleb and Eric are two people that I remember for sure. Was it Caleb Burns? And I don't know what Eric's last name was. Um, or maybe Barnes. I don't know. It's been forever, right? Can you can you remember or recall what happened when you were in school in 2004, 2005? Um, so yeah, and it's like what almost 20 years ago now, which is crazy to think of, right? Um, but yeah, eventually, I think what happened was Chris ended up riding the bus with me or something, and eventually, over time when you become friends, eventually you start to get to know each other, and um, I think what ended up happening was either Chris had a birthday party or somebody, and we all went over to Chris's house, and Chris had. I ended up finding out Chris was rich and he had a lot of money, and um, I think what in his case, his at that point, I thought his dad was a singer and his mom was like a fashion designer or something. And for me, it was kind of like kind of a crazy, you know, experience because we were growing up poor. You know, my dad was broke. He was, I don't know if he was making much of many money. From what I understand, he wasn't making much of any money when he was a professor, psychology professor back at the college. Um, but I think when he was with CMS, he was making a little bit more. But he kept problem is whatever money he was making, he kept getting into debt and spending the money left and right. So he never saved up any money. And my mom was the only person who was inclined to really save up, but he was taking all of my mom's money. Um, so going over to Chris's place, and Chris being rich, day and night, right? So he had a gaming room. I didn't really have. Well, actually, I did have a little bit of a gaming room. Um, but eventually, I think what happened was we started hanging out. I was hanging out at his place. He hanged out at my place, and then we started being friends. He had his own GameCube, and luckily, the GameCubes were nice, where they had like a handle, and it was like semi-portable. It wasn't completely portable. I would even argue that it was better than the freaking Wii, because the Wii all had all these cables and stuff, and then at that point, I thought the Nintendo GameCube was better than the Nintendo Wii. Even though I think the Wii came out in 2006, but it's kind of a later on, kind of right when we were in middle school, right? But yeah, Chris had a gaming room. He had a big house. I know we played Super Smash Bros. Melee. Even like one point, his dad took me, was it Chris, me, and a few of our other school friends that I knew. Like I think Eric, and I don't know if Caleb was in it, but Eric was in the group. Um, and I don't know much about Eric. I don't nowadays. I just remember he was a friend of ours, and he was in the French program. But um, yeah, we went to like this facility, like a church kind of, and I think his dad may have been like a pastor, or what do you call it, associate pastor, or somebody who helps like the main guy there. But um, yeah, we were playing like in an arcade at this church, and it was like the only church that I knew that had that, and I felt welcome there. Even though everybody was like dressed up, and I was like one of the few kids who was not dressed up. Again, growing up from a poor family and all that. Um, so yeah, and I remember some of the weird things that were kind of cool. We had a big house, which was I don't recall being like when I like from 2005 earlier. I don't remember being in like in a rich place, other than maybe like the occasional college or university we might like visit, with probably my dad's connections at that point, because he still had like residual college connections, and it was like I don't know what he was trying to do. Maybe he was trying to get into a different college or something at that time. It's hard to say, but in regards to Chris had not only the big house, he had like a lot of interesting things that at that point in time was really like brand new and nobody else had. Like I think it was the first person I knew to get a Nintendo DS. I just got the weird flash message that lasted for a second. So I'm gonna hope it's gonna keep going well here. But um, yeah, Chris had the Nintendo DS, and what was cool about that was like not only did nobody have this like Nintendo DS, it was like an unusual model. Um, may have been like a developer's model or something like that. I don't know for sure, but he was the only person I knew that had this, and I think this he probably had. Yeah, he had the first like the first model, like the bulky Nintendo DS, not the Nintendo DS Lite, like the one before it. Because when I got the Nintendo DS, I had like a slick version, which I think was the DS Lite. And this was like before the DSi, before the 3DS. Um, so yeah, I was like, man, this is the coolest thing ever, because it had two screens, right? and his was like, I think what they call backlit or LED lit, and I had, the Game Boy Advance was what I had, and I couldn't play my Game Boy Advance in the dark, but with the Nintendo DS you could, and for me that was like revolutionary at that point. And I think when did I get the Nintendo DS? 2005, maybe 2006, and I think the Wii I got 2007 or 2008. Because I never got anything brand new right when it came out. Especially poor growing up, and especially when we got into like the Nintendo Wii era. And I never got the Nintendo Wii U because I remember it being expensive. And I was hitting on the Nintendo Wii U at that time. On my internet 3 times in a row, I get. Bro, my internet's going out, in and out, in and out. Yeah, this is not good. I've never had this internet keep flashing on me like this. All right, I'm gonna still keep going because it looks like it's just for like a second, and I hope it doesn't freaking disconnect just from something like this. But I'll tell you a few more things. Let's see. Chris's mom was a wonderful person. I remember she was making sandwiches for us before, and she made like the best sandwiches. At that point, it was like better than anything I had at home. Because she would be like the person who would make like a really good sandwich, like toasting the bread, and I think was it turkey meat or ham? I want to say it was turkey and some kind of cheese, probably like yellow cheese, maybe cheddar. Could have been American cheese. I don't remember. But I think because of her, Chris's mom is like one of the people who got me into like eating sandwiches all the time. But what ended up happening was Chris eventually, like when we got into 7th grade, because 6th grade was like when they really messed up the whole like school system. Like we had to go and take like freaking first they try to throw everybody into a band class. You got to go learn how to play a musical instrument. And I'm like, why do I have to do this? I was so confused at that point. But they had this weird like thing going on at this school. But eventually, because of that, I had trouble seeing Chris all the time in 6th grade, and in 7th grade, his family decided to move to Canada. This is the 7th time I'm losing connection. What the heck is wrong with my internet? This is not good. But yeah, they moved to Canada, and it's going off my internet, and this is really horrible. And the weirdest thing is I'm seeing this timer going back and forth, like the recording, like it shows how long you've been live. The numbers are counting down and going back. That's not good. Yeah, I got to figure out what's with this internet. It's, wacky internet. Yeah. Oh, by the way, X Alex, shout out to X Alex for destroying my internet yesterday. He called me when I was like live, and the whole stream started crashing. Like it froze the computer, took out the internet, and I had to. That's why yesterday's live stream I had to cut off early. Man, if this messes up this live stream, I'm not going to be happy. But anyway, so I guess the last few things in regards to Chris. Yeah, Chris moved to Canada and basically has been living in Canada. I don't know if it's Montreal or Quebec or Quebec. I don't know where exactly. But ever since he moved to Canada, I haven't really been able to, keep in touch with him, and he's been busy in his own life, doing well. So that's, a good thing. I have no clue if they'll ever come back to Charlotte or not. But, if he does, that would be cool to meet up sometime. Maybe talk sometime. Maybe I might get him to get online at one point. But, it's a tricky thing because, again, he's up in Canada. I don't know what the time zone difference is for him, or if there is one or not. I think he lives on the east side of Canada versus Rooster being on the west. So, we'll see how that goes. If whether or not if I should try that out. Um, but otherwise, guys, this has been Thigh Company. Thank you all so much for watching. Wanted to try out the friend story, see how that goes. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, like this video, comment down below what you want to see for future videos. Otherwise, guys, thank you all for watching. Peace out. Take care.